welcome back to another episode of the 86'd Life. I'm your host, Neil Strebig, and today I'm going to be continuing my talk on the stigmas of the industry. Last week I discussed how being a server, a chef, and a dishwasher, each one has a bit of a negative stigma with it from the actual clientele that frequent the restaurants we work in. I actually want to elaborate that a bit more before I get to my guest on this evening, Sam Garra, who actually is working at the Harbor Center in Buffalo, but has spent plenty of time working in the country clubs out here, especially at Allegheny Country Club. But before I do that, I want to talk about the actual stigmas that have been plaguing the misunderstandings. And I think a big reason why there are misunderstandings in this industry is a lot of people feel this is a stopgap profession. When I say stopgap, I believe that a lot of customers and individuals outside of the industry feel like most servers and chefs and bartenders, it's the position you have while you're either A, going to school, or you're working part-time, or going to graduate classes. It's your in-between job before you get a quote-unquote real job, which cracks me up because our job is real. There's nothing else like it, and there's nothing else that demands such acute awareness and intensity as I described in that first show. But elaborating on that idea of the stopgap, and I believe it's a perception that everyone in the industry and everyone outside of the industry can agree that perception does exist with that stopgap and that noticeable difference between how people in the actual profession view it and people out of the actual profession view it. Now, I think a lot of this has to do with the actual idea of the feast or famine side of the industry. Being a high-stress environment, it demands a lot from each individual component on all aspects, front of house and back of house. And when you get left behind in that feast or famine idea, it can really break you mentally, and while it can also break you physically. Because you could be a very talented chef, and you could know all your mother sauces in and out. You can sit there and you could have been classically French trained. But if you can't handle a rush in the restaurant you're in, and you continue to get in the weeds, well, you're going to be out of that kitchen in no time. They're going to find someone else who can do that job better and can continue to make the restaurant go in the direction it needs to go in. The same is for serving. If you can't handle one table, you can't handle orders, and you continue to mess up, they're going to replace you. And a lot of that has to do with performance-based actual critical thinking from the manager's point of view. But that performance-based thinking is also a big reason why the turnover ratio is so high in our industry. It might also allude to the whole idea of the stopgap. And because some people do get into it, just, hey, I'll quick wait some tables, make some quick money while I'm in college. And that's all well and good, and it definitely is a successful part-time job. I've known plenty of teachers that actually continue to teach full-time and then grew up in the service industry, so they still serve part-time on the weekends because they know it can make a couple $100 working a 5-6 hour shift. There's nothing wrong with that. But for the ones of you that are doing this full time, that perception can definitely hurt, but at the same time, you're completely aware of what I'm talking about when I say this feast or famine mentality. And I think when we do weed out some of the people that aren't doing this completely full time, don't have their complete heart set in it, we're kind of hurting ourselves. And when I say hurting ourselves, I think it's unique because I'm not sure of any other profession that not only has an apprenticeship kind of aspect to it, but hurts itself while promoting within. And when I say promoting within, it is just that. It's the notion of, hey, I was a dishwasher. I came up. I had this guy, Oscar Perez. Worked with him at Mama's Mama's Restaurant, Cafe Bocce in Hackettstown, New Jersey. And Oscar was this crazy Guatemalan guy. And when we used to work on the line, him and I would call each other Los Diablos. It was our nickname. But I was just a 19, 20-year-old kid that all I could basically do was handle a rush. But when I was working with Oscar, I learned pretty quickly how he handled and how he approached a Saturday night rush. In that particular restaurant, it was chaotic, well, controlled chaos. And I used to watch him and see how he would not just cook one pasta at a time, but he would preemptively think ahead and be like, you know what? If I got 4 orders of fettuccine on the board, I'm going to dump 6 because I know at least 2 more coming in. If one of those ends up getting wasted, I have to hold it, okay. And then the whole idea of par cooking sauces, par cooking your mise en place, your side parts of the dishes to get ahead. And that thinking ahead so you don't get weeded, I didn't learn on my own. I learned by watching him and working with him. Without Oscar, I would never have known how to actually cook. I would never have known how to become a chef. It was something that, again, I never went to school for it, so I wouldn't have ever learned it in school, but it was that notion that a guy ahead of me on the hierarchy of that said restaurant took me under his wing and was patient enough to show me how to do certain things to make my job easier, my life easier. And I wasn't a dishwasher when I came there, But there was plenty of times to where when I was working at the Sands Casino at St. James, we would take dishwashers and turn them into prep cooks and then chefs. And this goes across the board at most restaurants. Your good help, your good dishwashers end up leaving you because you need to fill a void in your hotline or maybe just your prep staff to where you take them, they show good work ethic, good qualities that you want to mold, and you want to make them a better worker for your establishment. So you groom them to become a prep cook or a chef. And this is the problem then too, because not only does it create high turnover, but it's a joke in the industry that you never end up keeping good help. The good help never stays, especially when it comes to back of house and dishwashers. Now that's definitely a topic for another day I can divulge into more seriousness. But with the whole idea of turnover, it's unique because that turnover comes from an apprenticeship, whether it be serving, bartending, or culinary. Most of us learn the true heart of this trade, the true heart of this profession through somebody else. We learn it from somebody ahead of us that takes us under their wing and really shows us the ropes of how this industry works and what to expect. And no education is going to ever prepare you for that. And I think that goes for any education in general, in any profession, to where no matter what you learn in school, the real world is much, much different. For us, it's unique because you can get that professional level experience when you're 18, 19, or 20 years old and really hone in and really groom yourself to excel in this industry in any of the three facets of it. So is it really a stopgap job then? If that's the case, I don't necessarily think so. The stopgap, I think, comes into when you do have people working part-time and you do have people that treat it as such. And like any profession, the ones that aren't truly in it will end up leaving and get weeded out. But I will agree with this standpoint of the actual stopgap position. And this is the idea of the actual anxiety and the depression and the stress that comes with it. No matter who you learn from, no one's going to be able to actually teach you how to handle a rush. Me personally, I excelled in this industry as a chef because I could handle a rush. I never got stressed. I was always laid back. I actually used to have my chefs make fun of me all the time for laughing on the line or at least smiling. Even though I took my job very seriously, I'm that type of personality to where I'm very methodical and I don't worry ever too much about what's going on. And I just handle my business, have fun with it, and treat it like that. Because I enjoy doing what I do. I enjoy cooking. I enjoy serving. I enjoy making customers happy. So why the hell would I worry about that, stress about it, or get upset if I get an order or two behind? You just plug on through and handle your business. That's what it's all about. But when you're in the wrong place, in the wrong restaurant, or just with the wrong team, or even wrong moment in your life, that stress in a high-octane environment, it can kill you. It can literally mentally and physically break you down. The physical toll is always there, but when that mental toll of, hey, you know what, maybe you're just having a couple bad nights, a bad week, then that idea of the competition that there's someone in the wings that's showing a bit more promise right now, handling their business better than you, that job security isn't necessarily there in our profession. And again, that's a topic I'm definitely going to divulge in later this season, but for now, it is one of those things that furthers the fallout for good workers, because when you hit a wall or you fall, it's very tough to get back to that level, or at least come back at it with what you were. You're going to be a bit of a shell of the worker you were for a short period of time. And that's the whole idea of good teams and good management that see true talent, good hard workers, and exploit that in a positive manner. And I think it happens a lot more in restaurants, and I don't necessarily think it happens too much in clubs, in country clubs. And why I bring up clubs, it's because the guest I have for this evening, Sam Garra, I actually worked with him at Allegheny Country Club. He was service captain up there, bright kid, good future, always had his heart in the service industry. But when I worked with him in the club, I always laugh because the club mentality is a bit different. It's a bit more corporate with how they view things. So that idea of weeding guys out doesn't necessarily happen. It's definitely much more of a lifer kind of job. And from a back house point of view, because I worked as a chef at Longview Country Club and Allegheny Country Club. I was actually their roundsman. And then I actually switched and did front of house for them for about almost close to a year. Up down, did the expediting and banquet service. But I always used to joke that being a chef at a country club is essentially where chefs go to die. Because that stress and that anxiety and that pressure from actually cooking on the line, banging out quality dishes, doing your thing, it isn't quite there at the country club. The rush doesn't exist. In a restaurant, you're going to have 2, 3, maybe 4 turns on a Saturday night. When I say turns, if you have a 100-seat restaurant, it means you fill the restaurant up, you clear out 75% of them, that 75% comes right back within about 15, 20 minutes. Not necessarily 15, 20 minutes, we'll say about half an hour. But essentially, you're going to go from full restaurant, 10-minute pause, full restaurant, 10-minute pause, full restaurant, 10-minute pause. Those are turns. Now, granted, this is where the component of a good hostess, knowing the layout of the restaurant and what a kitchen can and can't handle, all comes into play. But with terms of an actual country club, you don't have that actual turn. You're doing more banquet service, which is always called hurry up and wait, because you're going to get hit with one big swoop from a wedding or anything else like that and basically be done. But for 2 hours before that, all your prep's done. You're basically just waiting to finally get hit and to finally actually start doing some serious work. Your setup time is 3 to 4 hours for most events. Your prep time for culinary side, you're talking about the same, maybe 5, 6, maybe a couple of days worth, depending on the actual menu and everything else, and what you don't have in-house, what you need to do. But none of it's actually truly stressful. It's very laid back. It's like being a prep cook constantly. You're just waiting to do your job and let the people enjoy the food. But it's weird, though, if you have an a la carte service at a club, because that rush comes in occasionally. It's never going to be the same, but even 100 seats in a country club is going to be pretty significant because the level of food you're doing, and also not just the quality of food, but how the actual service is set up. It's a bit different. So 100 people there might feel like 200-300 somewhere else. However, without that turn, it's odd because it's almost like blue balls then, because your adrenaline goes up. You're like, oh yeah, I'm in the groove. I'm doing my thing. And all of a sudden you're like, oh crap. That's it. Like, it's over. Like, I was in my zone. Whereas a restaurant, maybe you start off a little bit slow. The first wave kicks your butt a little bit. You get in your groove in the second, and then all of a sudden, you just, boom, you're in it. You're locked in. You're good to go. The rest of the night, you just finish strong. In a club, you don't have that. You start off bad, you're going to have a bad night because there's no second turn. It's just one go, and that's it. And I'll get into that a bit more of why it's like that. But for now, I'd like to bring on Sam Garra and do a little Q&A with him for this evening. I'm on the actual phone with Sam Garra from the Harbor Center in Buffalo. I actually had the privilege of working with him at Allegheny Country Club. Smart kid, bright kid. Actually got his BS in sports management and had a concentration in private club management from Niagara University. Sam, how you doing today?
I'm doing all right, man. Appreciate you having me on here, and it's great to be here.
Pleasure, man. It's a pleasure. But first thing I wanted to ask you is honestly, I don't even know this question even from talking to you. How'd you get started in the industry, honestly? What made you actually want to be in private club management?
I was thinking about that, and, it kind of came about when I got to Niagara. I knew I wanted to be in a sport management major, but I didn't really know what. And, I knew I loved playing golf. I've played golf, since I was a kid. And there just happened to be an organization that placed kids working in private clubs. And I thought, man, what a better way to get near golf courses than to do this, So I joined, and after my first year, man, I fell in love with food and beverage, and I fell in love with everything outside of golf. And I got involved in it with golf and fell in love with everything outside of golf.
Nice. I honestly forgot you're an avid golfer, to be honest with you. But
yes, sir. I wouldn't say I'm very good, but I am an avid golfer.
I'm sure you're better than me. Trust me. My mid game is the only thing I'm good at. But now, you were at the Harbor Center now. You're hockey operations.
Yeah.
So you've kind of deviated a bit from the service industry.
Yeah. When I left school and I got the job down in Pittsburgh, I found myself wondering if I was going to go through life never knowing what it was like to work in my major. And what I mean by that was, not only do I love golf, but I love playing hockey. And, hockey is huge here in Buffalo, as winter is, 6 months out of the 12 months. So I had the opportunity to come back home and, work in that field. And it was just something that I couldn't say no to. And it, to this day, I miss working in food and beverage, but
I can understand this. You had to take your shot, if you will. Definitely nothing wrong with that. I was actually talking about our job and our profession kind of being a stopgap, if you will. So it's ironic that you saw your chance to jump into hockey and take that. But what from the service industry honestly prepared you for the job you have now?
The high pressure of being in the food and beverage world. As well as I do that from 5 o'clock to 7 o'clock, we're going. And we're going at a very high pace and everything's moving. And to take that and to transition it into the sports world where you may only have one day where it's crazy, but it might be crazy from the moment you walk through the door at 6 a.m. and you might have a team of you might have 16 teams of little 12-year-olds running crazy, and you're crazy from the moment you get there to the moment that you leave. So that was one of the biggest things that helped me move from food and beverage into hockey.
Your coworkers remark about your ability to handle stress better than them.
You know what? They haven't really. We've talked about it, but for me, I always loved to work in the high pressure. When I played sports, when I played soccer, I was a goalie. I always wanted that high pressure level. That's why I play golf, because golf is, your next shot, that's on you. You got to be at your best at all times. And that was one of the great things about food and beverage was you're high pressure all the time.
Now, you originally became a manager at a pretty young age, yeah? It was about, 18, 19, 21?
Yeah, so when I finished my freshman year, I had the opportunity to go down to the Rolling Rock Club, which is in a very little town of Pennsylvania called Ligonier, actually where the late and great Arnold Palmer is from.
South of Latrobe, right?
Yeah. It's about an hour and 20 minutes outside of downtown Pittsburgh. But
Okay.
My first summer there, I was a rotational guy, so I got to learn the ins and outs of private club world and really see what it was all about. And then after my sophomore year, went back down there, and that's when I was the pool bar manager, supervisor, call it what you will. And that was when I got my start in managing an inventory, whether it was an inventory of food, an inventory of drinks. And, it really wasn't until my job at Allegheny where I was a full-on supervisor, of a team.
I was say, an inventory at a country club, though, it's freaking massive, though. I mean, you have everything under the sun, though.
Right. But one of the great things about having that in a private club is you don't really have a budget. If you need something, you just go get it. And that's, and that's just how, at least for me, that's how it was. And that kind of made it easy.
It's definitely one of the more, the nicer parts of being in a club. There is no price limit by any means.
Which is nice and, which can backfire, go on that mindset, you don't have a budget. So you just order and order and order. And then all of a sudden you're sitting on product, for 3 months. Yeah. And then, you're SOL.
That's when you just throw a 4th of July party in May, right? Some sort of barbecue.
Yeah, that's right.
But now, what was the biggest difficulty being a young supervisor, really? Because especially in a club, the legacies there and the older workers, they've been there for maybe 15, 20 years. I mean, at ACC, we had a couple workers that were there for 25 plus. How do you win them over being half their age and being the new guy, even at the establishment?
Well, the biggest thing that I had going in was I didn't want to go in and act like I knew everything, I didn't want to have that, I know more than you, that's why I'm here. I didn't want to do that because clearly, like you said, they've been there for 25, 30 years. I wanted to learn as much from them as they could learn from me. And that was the biggest thing that I went in with was I'm here to help you. I'm here to support you. I'm not here to boss you around. I'm not here to yell. I'm just here to help, and I'm here to work. We all work well as a unit. Everything's going to go well. And that was one of the biggest things went in with was just learn from them and work with them. Be on the same page. Now,
did you ever have? I'm at ACC. I don't ever recall anything at the other previous clubs. Is there ever any moments though? There was a sort of conflict or a standoff, if you will?
You know what? Not that I can think right off the top of my head. I've been very lucky and very fortunate in the club that I've worked in, where in the sense that everyone that I worked with was very supportive of me and, helping me grow as a young manager. There were definitely nights where we had our rough nights and dinner service was awful, and things just for some reason weren't going the way that they should have, but those are some things that you just learn from and you bounce back and you make sure that they don't happen again.
Let's say a couple of hiccups here or there, definitely throw off service. But let's say, was there anybody though in particular coming up that really showed you the ropes though? I mean, I know you're interested in the industry, you definitely do concentration as far as your studies go, but I think for most of us there's at least one or two people that really show us the heart of the industry. Was anybody for you?
Yeah, I would say that there's probably two people. One of those was my manager at Rolling Rock. My first year there, going in, just as an 18-year-old kid who didn't know anything about food and beverage and only knew golf. And he was the one who kind of really took me under his wing and spent countless hours over that summer with, one-on-one personal time. If something didn't go right, he pulled me to the side and said, this didn't go right. This is how it should have went, but this is how we're going to make sure that doesn't happen. Make sure that, you're a better worker later on. And then my second one is actually my mentor to this day. He's the general manager at Atlanta Athletic Club. And I met him at the CMA World Conference my sophomore year. The insights that I've gotten from him and the personal things that he's told me about his journey through clubs is something that I consider invaluable. It's just huge. Whenever I had a problem or whenever I had a tough night at work and, I thought maybe this isn't what I wanted to be doing, I would just pick up the phone and call him, and he's been such a huge help. So, those are the kind of two that I look back on, and those two have definitely got to be it.
I say, what type of advice did he give you, though, specifically?
Well, one of the biggest things was no matter how hard your personal life may be, maybe you go into work and you just don't want to be there. You're feeling down. You're feeling down about, something that may have happened with a girlfriend or family. You got to just walk in and take a moment, take a deep breath, and attack that day with the most positive attitude, because the last thing that you want to do is let your members know that you're not feeling your best or that you're not there to give them your best. That was one of the biggest things was early on when I was first getting into it was, how to always attack each shift with the positive attitude that I can, because we are there to make their days and their lives better, especially in the private club world. So that's probably one of the biggest things that I've taken away.
The whole idea of checking your baggage at the door is huge in our industry. It's paramount, really.
Yes.
Being a supervisor, did you ever have any moments to where employees didn't necessarily do that, didn't check their personal baggage at the door?
Yes, and I feel like that happens more often than people think, but how it's all in the back of the house. You rarely ever see it, in the front of the house and on the actual floor. But one of my biggest things was always, if you're having a really bad day and you come to work, I wanted them to find me. And if you have to yell at me for 5 minutes and get whatever it is off of your chest, I wanted you to do that. I wanted you to come and I wanted you to talk to me. Get all your anger or sadness or whatever it is that you may have been going through. Get it all out and then take a drink of water and feel better and go to the front of the house. That was one of the biggest things was...
You made yourself an emotional punching bag.
Well, yeah, but in the sense was that it helped, I'd rather them get it all out to me than have a member ask a question wrong and blow up on them, and then we have a whole other problem, Now
that notion, that's a very friendly, empathetic thing to do. And I think in our industry, both sides, restaurants and clubs, that kind of family attribute to where you're like, hey, you know what? You're having a bad day. I want you to come out. Always know I'm here for you. You can lean on me if you need to. Do you feel, because me personally, I feel like that's very eclectic to our industry and very intangible to the service industry, and other professions don't have that.
Right. And I think you're totally right there, but I think it's something that is necessary because of the amount of time that a unit spends. If think of July 4th, arguably the biggest day for private clubs.
Absolutely.
Massive parties. You're working with someone, you're working with a team for 8 to 12 to 16 to 20 hours,
Yeah.
And if you're not there, you don't know them like they are an extension of your family, how can you possibly work your best? That's just got to be the mindset that you have, is you're going to spend majority of your time with these people, so you might as well be there for them and act as if they are part of your family.
Now, you've been pretty open though too with working with a bit of anxiety. I think this industry itself not only produces anxiety but a bit of depression as well. And I know you had the article last year with Stigma Fighters about both those topics. One, how have you been able to overcome that? And two, how liberating was it to actually write that article and get that off your chest?
Well, so for the first part, what was it like working with it? Working with it wasn't so much of the problem. And I say that because when you're working in clubs and you're working in restaurants, you don't have time to think about it, because your work is so fast-paced that that's just what you're doing.
Yeah, there's no break.
It's the time out of work. And, for me, it was the time outside of work and in a new city that was the toughest for me. I felt like every time I got out of work, it was a battle. It was a battle just to get to the next shift because I didn't know, exactly what to do in the city. I didn't really have many friends outside of work, so it was just me. And it was just me in downtime and plenty of time to think to myself. And as someone who suffers through that, thinking to yourself is the worst possible thing. And as in terms of did you ask what's the best way that I've overcome it?
Yes.
The best way I've found to overcome it is, one, you just got to know that when you tell people these things that, they're going to be there to help you. They're not going to be there to point and laugh as, many of us think is, we can't share what's really going on because, it's not other people's problems. So why burden them with something that's going on with your inner self? So that was one of the biggest things was talking to people, getting it out, and leaning on friends and family. And one of the bigger reasons why I did move back home was, I needed my support group of my family. Being an old school Italian family, family is everything. So that's probably one of the biggest things that I've learned to overcome it, is use your support system.
Now, you brought up an interesting point, though, during that as well. The whole idea of the work family and your friends are essentially your coworkers. Now, for you being in a new city when you came down here to Pittsburgh, it definitely was problematic. Do you know anyone else that shared that same thing? Because it is weird. We do work, we kind of isolate ourselves with the hours we put in. Do you think that's beneficial to the industry as a whole to have that work family and be such a cognizant part of it? Or do you think it actually kind of hurts, especially when you talk about stigmas and the whole idea that we're kind of a crazy fraternity of the you don't know unless you're in it mentality?
Man, that's a good question. I think it's a little bit of both. I think it's a great thing for when you're at work and you feel that certain comfort level, that certain friendship level. Drawing on when we worked together, I could walk into work and bust on you about how much you sucked in FIFA. But there was that certain level of friendship, and I think that
you put me on blast on my own show, man.
I'm totally kidding, but I feel like that's paramount in any job that you work in, and I feel like that leads to a better working environment. Now, the con to that is, unless you don't have enough functions or outside of work time where your spouse, girlfriend, boyfriend, whatever it may be, if they don't kind of have that time with your work family, they're going to feel as if they're being isolated and you're not giving the same attention to them as you are to your people at work, when in reality you are. It's just a different kind of time and a different kind of attention.
Well said, well said. Now, I'm going to switch gears a bit, though, because you did spend a little bit of time in restaurants, though, too, in your younger years, right?
Yes. I was a bartender, I was a cook, I was a dishwasher. Yeah.
Did you make the switch to clubs? I know golf played a little bit of a role as far as the culture, but did you make a switch because you saw a bit more stability in club life compared to restaurants?
Yes, that is a valid, that's a true point. But I actually got my start in clubs first. So I went from clubs, and then while going to college, I worked in restaurants. So I saw both, but yeah, a club life, if you're going to be in the food and beverage, 100% I would choose club.
Now, you say that because of the difference in stress or just the stability and the fact that job security is definitely greater in a club than a restaurant?
Well, I think that kind of depends on your position, to be honest.
All right, how so?
Oh, I think if you work in a club and you're a manager, I think there's a greater sense of comfort level knowing your job is going to be there the next 30 years, as opposed to a restaurant. Something could change, owners could change, you could run out of money. But I mean, if you're a server or a bartender, I feel like, yes, your job's going to be there, but I wouldn't necessarily get a certain comfort level. I wouldn't say just to not do your work because your job's going to be there, is what I'm trying to get at.
It's a valid point for any profession.
Right.
Now, when you're at the ACC and the clientele there, approaching a typical, and I say clientele, I'm talking about the members and the staff.
Okay.
How was your approach with wine service at a club? I'm not sure if you had to do wine service at a restaurant, but how did you approach selling wine at a club?
It's much different. Well, okay, so in my personal, I've never worked at a restaurant that was very high on their wine, in a sense where all the restaurants that I've worked at, most of the people who would come and eat, they didn't really care what they were drinking wine-wise. All they would ask is, can I have a glass of white, glass of red? And then, you would go on and you say, well, would you like a, Grigio or Riesling? They just said, whatever, as long as it's white. Where at in a club, wine service and wine sales is a whole other ball game. Members have wine lockers. They have certain vintages and wineries that are in love with, some that they hate. So different ball game in terms of knowledge with who's coming in to eat about wine. And I think in club, your waitresses, bartenders, and waiters have to be much more knowledgeable in wine and more knowledgeable to the members' preferences.
Now, for you personally, did you have to go out on your own and explore and actually read up on wine, the regions? I mean, even just the science to labels in wine, especially in Italy. The Italians are crazy with it, but there's so many aspects of actual wine to where when you're presenting in a higher clientele like that, how deep did you dive into it just to get by to make sure that, hey, you were able to stay afloat for your position?
Right. I dove into it, I'm going to be honest and say only a fair amount, only because, when I was in my early years as a freshman and sophomore down at Rolling Rock, I was very fortunate enough to work with a level 3 sommelier and to have a full-time one at the club who literally you could ask any question about any kind of wine, any type of grape, he would have the answer, and he would talk your ear off about it. What was great about that was, we actually took a class where we actually sat down and he would put different kinds of wines, from different regions, and we would taste them, go through taste tests and write down, why a certain wine, maybe it's more acidy, has more tannins, makes your mouth drier, things of that nature. So that was huge for me. But as far as going out on my own, I never really ventured. I would go online and I would read a whole lot about it, but I was never a huge wine guy for myself where I would actually go out and taste them. But as far as reading, I would definitely read up, and I would know my stuff, but I couldn't side with the members on what it would taste like.
Now, do you ever...
which is tough.
Understandable. Do you ever miss the industry? I know you're doing the hockey thing now, and Harper Center hosted 2015, 2016 NHL Combine?
Yeah, and we're actually hosting the one this year, too.
Nice, very nice. Do you ever miss the service side of it, though?
Every goddamn day, dude. And that's not to say that I regret it or I don't love what I'm doing now, but there's definitely certain aspects that I miss every day. I miss never knowing who's going to walk through the front door of a club, never knowing what relationship I could make for that day. And, I guess that's the same everywhere you go, or looking forward to knowing that a certain member is coming to that club and that you'll get to see that person and have a conversation. And, there's certain aspects that I miss. I miss having a dinner time rush. There's so many things that I miss about it, but the one key thing is I like having a life outside of work.
Man, that is a fair thing, but I was going to say there's nothing quite like a Saturday night rush. There's
nothing. Nope.
It's unique in that sense. But honestly, though, Sam, that kind of does it for everything I wanted to cover with you, man.
All right.
And if there's anything you want to bring up, by all means, do so.
Biggest differences between restaurants and clubs.
What do you think the biggest difference is?
Well, restaurants, granted, there's some restaurants that have their niche. There's those old school diners that you go to for a shake and a hot dog, But there's restaurants, the majority of the restaurants have to keep up with the times. They have to change. They have to roll with the punches. And if society doesn't want tips, then they have to adjust. If society wants them to get rid of their phone reservation system and go to apps and online, so it's something that they have to go to. With club, change is not necessarily welcomed. And members are members there because they can go there and get the same thing that they've had since they were 10,
Chippewa soup, man.
It's true. Yeah. Chippewa soup. When I worked at Rolling Rock, me being from Buffalo, I had no idea what the hell Chippewa soup was.
But I don't think anybody still does, to be honest with you.
No, I don't think anyone does either. But it's, it's something that is a mainstay there, and you have to have it. And recipes don't change. Even if new chefs come in to a club, recipes will stay the same. And, people who go to clubs have to adapt to the club, ways of working and ways of running. And, I think that's one of the critical things. And, other than that is that a club to a member is an extension of their home. And we have to make them feel as at home as possible, knowing their last names, knowing their kids' names when they walk through the door, knowing what they like to drink, knowing that, they might switch up their entree every night, but damn it, if you don't have mashed potatoes or their veggie, that's going to be a problem. So I'd say that's got to be one of the biggest things or biggest differences between restaurants and clubs.
As a manager, when you approach a table then, and I mean, being in the back of house at ACC, and even though I was Expo when you were there, well aware of when we're out of something or something might be a bit difficult, how do you go back out there and tell, Mr. and Mrs. Smith that, hey, you know what, we don't have mousseline potatoes today. We can't do that, or we don't have the porterhouse anymore. How do you go back and tell them that without them not understanding that?
Well, I think, obviously you have to be very upfront. I'm sorry, Mr. Smith, we do not have the porterhouse steak that you really love. However, we have a really great, other, whether it be chicken or, anything else that you might like, try and push the alternative that, unfortunately we don't have what you love, but either one, you should try this, or two, this is the closest thing to what you love. And I've had those moments where sometimes you got to take a bullet where, you might run out. Life happens and it sucks, or sometimes you just got to bite the bullet where you don't have that soup, or you don't have that side dish for them, and no matter what you offer, and no matter, how kind you may be, not what they came there for. So you just definitely try and push something that's either similar in taste or something that, you have that is new that you want them to try because it could be their new favorite. But I'd say that the majority of the time they were really cool about it, and they're like, oh, that's no problem, I'll have this instead. But yeah, definitely just be as nice as possible and try and push something that's similar to their liking.
And get them to try something new. Be progressive with the
But
menu.
again, that's not always the popular opinion.
Understandable. But honestly, appreciate it, Sam. Appreciate you calling in and taking the time to share your opinions in the industry and being a part of the 86 Life. Appreciate it, man.
Yeah, man, it's been a huge blast. On a personal note, I love what you're doing, man. I read your articles on Facebook, your photos, man. Keep up the good work, and hopefully our cross paths again.
But honestly, man, I appreciate it, man.
All right, man.
All right, take care, man.
You as well.
All right, that was Sam Garra, previously of Allegheny Country Club here in Pittsburgh, previous of Rolling Rock Club, and current hockey operations manager at the Harbor Center. I want to thank Sam again. For time being, going to take a quick commercial break and then get back to you. Of course, 86 Life would like to thank the Center of Media Innovation at Port Park University for allowing us to use their brand new state-of-the-art radio and podcast studio. I'd also like to thank one of our sponsors, Einstein Brothers Bagels at 3 PPG Place, right outside of Market Square. They open Monday through Friday, 5 a.m. to 5 p.m. Once again, back with 86 Life. I'm your host, Neil Streebig. I'd like to thank Sam Garra calling in, sharing his thoughts on the club versus restaurant side of things, which I touched on before his phone call, and I'd like to actually elaborate a little bit more, and especially the concept of the notion that club members don't necessarily always understand what it means to say no, and they're not really receptive to change by any means. We joked about Chippewa soup on the phone call, and Chippewa soup is a Western PA club thing, which I still have no idea what the hell it is. It looks like just mud. I'm sure the members would be upset if they listen to this podcast, but every cook I know that has had to touch this or make this, it looks like shit, straight up. It's doo-doo brown. And it literally is just taking canned split pea with canned tomatoes, doing a little bit of mirepoix, carrots, onions, celery, roasting that off, throwing a little bit of tomato base, adding the split pea in there, adding the tomato soup, and then pureeing all this up, adding curry into the mix as well. And then as you puree it with the curry, you let it cool down, then you serve it naturally, heat it back up as you serve it, and then it's decorated with either sour cream or a little bit of creme fraiche, which is basically just sour cream anyway. But for whatever reason, this god-awful looking soup, not even just because the color looks god-awful, but the taste itself. Imagine just curry and split pea alone. No matter how much acidity from the tomatoes you bring in, nothing's going to cut that nastiness out. They love it. They eat it up. And it's a tradition that you just cannot get rid of. And at ACC, I used to hate it. But it's one of those things that 90% of the members enjoy. It's always been a part of it, and you just can't get it to change. And it's one of the pros and cons of restaurants versus clubs. And before I dive into the stress between the two, it's unique in that sense because I've had the privilege of working in both aspects of it. And I've always loved restaurants more, and I actually only switched to clubs to benefit my pursuit of my college degree. But to be honest with you, the level of stress is much lower, but the clientele can at times be worse because they don't understand when you don't have a product, or if you are trying to do a new thing. They're used to maybe having a 6-ounce filet, nice little piece of filet mignon, mousseline potatoes, and then whatever their veg melody will be. Maybe it would just be roasted squash, but they're used to just thick pieces of zucchini or squash cut in a bias. Say all of a sudden you switch it up, You're giving them flank steak. You're doing a little bit of chimichurri. You know what? You're doing a little bit of a roasted vegetable hash instead. You're adding maybe a little bit of cilantro in there too on naturally with the chimichurri, but you're changing everything up, and all of a sudden, it's a different take on that traditional protein, starch, and vegetable dish. But the members won't like it. They might not even try it because they're not familiar at all. It's just, it's different. And it's a very, very difficult thing as a chef to be in a situation like that. And as Sam mentioned, props to him as far as front of house being one of the people that can help change that dynamic on the front side of things. Because the two go hand in hand. You have to sell the product in the front of house. Back of house has to deliver perfect product as well. They make both their jobs easier. And it's unique because in a club, the front of house and back of house are a bit more meshed. Because the front of house will come back and a bit more of the chance to get away from the floor, if you will. It's not necessarily it's a bad thing, but it definitely is used a bit more of that break mentality. However, I will say the stress of the club is lower. Even though the clientele can be a bit more difficult to deal with, that stress is lower because you don't have that turns in the rush. You don't have this nonstop go, 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 go. At a marquee restaurant, you're showing up, you're sitting there, you're doing your prep work, you're getting your meats and plots ready. You're coming in 2, 3, maybe 4 hours early to set up for 4 or 5 hours of getting your ass kicked. And then you have about an hour of cleanup after that. Pretty long day that literally starts by walking on eggshells, starts by hitting the ground running because you got to do, A, B, C, and D, and X, Y, and Z at the end of the night to make sure you're going to have a great service. And then service kicks your butt. You're already fatigued, but now you got to break everything back down and make sure you're set up for the next day. Now, clubs have the same attributes to it, but instead you're not getting walloped all the way through. You're going to get walloped for an hour or so. Probably going to have a bit more product left over. You have a little bit less prep work. But the opposite side of things, you're not just doing your regular covers. If you're in a 100-seat restaurant, you're going to do those multiple turns like I talked about. At a club, you may only do 50 covers on an a la carte night, but you have 3, 4, 5 different parties that weekend. Maybe you have 2 weddings on a Saturday. Maybe you have 2 on a Sunday, and you have some banquet from a sports side of things. Maybe you have a little fiesta or a dance from one of the members if they want to have a sweet 16 for their daughter. Whatever the party may be, you may have 4, 5, 6 events, 100+ people that you're going to have to prep for then. So naturally, the prep doesn't necessarily allude to a higher stress level. Because prepping can always throw some music on, do your thing, handle your business, have a bit more fun with it. But you have to prep. You have a prep list that's, 3, 4 dozen items long. Well, yeah, that's going to be long. And then plus you start to do a la carte service. So say you get a little bit of a rough night and that odd night to where that really comes in, you do 100 people, you get slammed. Well, now you're a bit screwed though. So the stress is there, but it's much, much different. And from a server standpoint, it is a bit more laid back because you do have the waiting time as well. You have the setup, you have to break everything down. It's a much longer day, but it's not as fast paced. So you're doing the same amount of hours, but it can wear on you because you're not nonstop for 3, 4 hours. It's basically an hour boom, making sure entrees go out, say a plate of dinner. It's that 2-hour window of nonstop plate, clear, plate, clear, plate, clear. Meanwhile, you had 2 hours to set up and you're probably going to have another hour and a half breaking everything down and setting up another party for the next day. That can definitely wear on you. And it's a different level of stress and anxiety. And I think the stress and the anxiety side of things might be a big reason why, too, we are viewed as that stopgap kind of profession. Because it can burn you out really, really, really quick. I think restaurants have a more unique way of burning you out, if you will. I think clubs, though, have also a very unique way of burning you out, or at least having you submit. From my personal standpoint, I can't speak on everyone that has worked in clubs because I know a lot of friends and previous coworkers that absolutely love the club mentality. But for someone like myself that loves the rush and loves the adrenaline that comes with this industry, clubs was the worst thing because it was slowly like dying inside. I essentially didn't lose my crave and passion for cooking, but I definitely never got the same adrenaline, the same quench for an actual rush. It was few and far between. And when that doesn't happen, you're not fulfilled at work, it can definitely lead to depression in a way because you're not amped up as you normally would be. And when you think about the idea of coming into work and wanting to do what you want to do, that's what alludes to great work, and that's what alludes to the idea of the apprenticeship, though, as well, and the idea of someone ahead of you, someone making sure that, hey, you're on board, you know what's good, and really paying it forward, if you will. And paying it forward by making sure the guy next to you knows what they're doing. The way that Oscar took me under his wing back when I was working in Jersey, and the way my previous sous chefs, Willie Romero, Mark Yunt, Stacy Calls, Jacob O'Hearn, those guys all took me under the wing, paid it forward, and made sure that, hey, you know what? I could handle my business. Now, that's just them being good managers, but at the same time, too, it's also them being well aware of the fact that, hey, everyone needs to be on the same page. Everyone needs to get through this, and this is a tough industry, but you're not going to get through it just based on sheer talent or sheer knowledge alone. You need that help. You need that work family to sit there and offer you a shoulder to lean on, a hand to help with, and to really push on through it. It can be unforgivable at times, but that work family is an integral part of this industry. And as far as the stigma goes when it comes down to a real job, maybe some people are just jealous of that and the fact that I don't know too many bankers that go out every night and have a good time. Maybe a couple of happy hours here or there, or a couple real estate agents that might throw a little shindig for a barbecue. But I know very few professions that band together the way the restaurant industry does and the way even the club industry does, because we're all aware of the fact that, hey, we're going to have a really, really tough Saturday night, but we're all going to band together. We're all going to get through this, and we're going to make sure we bang this out, and we have Saturday night, we have a hell of a service. This wedding will be the best damn wedding that family's ever seen. This service will be the best damn Saturday night we've ever seen. It's the same attributes in both, and whether or not you still believe it's a stopgap job, and whether or not you yourself go into this as a stopgap job, there's no denying the fact that this profession lingers on with you, and it stays with you because there's so much sacrifice that goes into a simple rush, whether it be at a club or whether it be in a restaurant, that the sacrifices you make during a work shift and the realities of, hey, you know what, I'm also sacrificing my holidays, I'm sacrificing my free time, my nights where everyone else is out having a good time. It creates a unique empathy for your coworkers, and it creates a unique sense of respect in a workplace that no other industry profession can rival, period. And I'll take that to my grave as saying that. The level of respect and admiration you have for your peers that this industry creates in that sense is unrivaled. And once again, I want to thank everybody for listening. Next week, I know I jested about last week having the wine talk. Next show, we'll be talking to a few members from Allegheny Country Club and their managers and discussing more on the wine culture and the idea of what goes into understanding wine, the idea of being a sommelier, the court of the masters, and how integral that is for a club, but also a restaurant as well. And again, I want to thank you guys for listening to the 86'd Life. I want to thank Sam Garra for giving a call in. Best wishes to him up in Buffalo. I want to thank Andrew Conti and his staff at the Center of Media Innovation at Point Park University for allowing me to put on this show. And once again, I want to thank all of you for listening. This is Neil Strubing with the 86'd Life. Thank you.